You got a,
Yes,
you got
we
a
do.
little item in here on the agenda of background. Do you want to do that?
I will. Okay. In 2017, the Newman Lake Flood Control Zone District presented the County Board of Commissioners with a petition to appoint a board of appraisers to reconsider, revise, and/or reaffirm the classification and relative percentages of the parcels within the district under RCW 8609. Some of you may have heard this just for background. Some of you may have heard this before, but some of you may be new. So we thought we would give a little bit of background at the beginning of the meeting today. The objectives of this reassessment are for the Board of Appraisers to take a fresh look at the parcels contained within the boundaries of the district and determine or reassess the benefits each parcel receives from both flood control and stormwater management or water quality undertaken by the flood control zone district. And then based on those benefits, reconsider, revise, and/or reaffirm the current classification of each parcel with respect to each of the two purposes of the flood control zone district. In performing this reassessment, the Board of Appraisers is tasked with identifying every parcel that derives any benefit so that the assessments fairly distribute the costs of the district among as many benefited parcels as allowed by law. At the end of this reassessment, the Board of Appraisers will provide the Board of County Commissioners, acting as the supervisors of the flood control zone district, with a new base map and land descriptions outlining the classifications of the different lands on the base map based on their relative benefits derived separately for flood control and water quality. This new base map will be used to levy assessments on those parcels not otherwise classified as non-benefited based on their relative benefit ratios. This is the fourth meeting of the Board of Appraisers, and after collecting background information and visiting the Newman Lake area and properties, they're beginning the process of identifying current benefits received. The public is invited to provide input on the benefits they receive from the district later in the meeting or online on the Board of Appraisers website. And
Okay.
you got anything to add to that, Garrett? But that's what I had.
Not at this point. One thing I want to make clear. There's been some questions raised about what effect this is going to have on taxes, and I want to assure everybody out there that this has no bearing on taxes. We're not dealing with taxes. It will not affect your taxes in any way, shape, or form. This is strictly the assessment for flood control and water quality. Brian or Larry, any questions or comments from you? I guess not.
I'll chime in. I agree with that, Gary, in that there's separate components here. There's the property taxes, ad valorem property taxes, which the assessor does. Those will not be affected. The assessments for the flood control district may be affected. And that's if the benefit ratios change or the use of market value versus current use value changes, there could be a change in the assessments, and that's naturally part of our process.
The assessment for water control and water quality and flood control, not the assessment for ad valorem taxes.
Correct. Yes, I agree with that.
Now, I can see how individuals would look at it and think that what they're paying to support the functions of the lake is a tax. But it's not a real estate property tax. There's a distinction between the two. And what we decide will have nothing to do with what the assessor decides. I guess that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing to do with ad valorem taxes. We had talked about at the last meeting, the split parcels where you have waterfront and uplands. And I talked with the chief appraiser on this subject, and they do have separate values. Most of these are in the area that you're working on, Larry. On the southwest corner of the lake, for example, the parcel we discussed, the waterfront portion is valued at $100 a front foot. And the back portion, uplands portion, which is actually, it's a level parcel, is assessed at 50% of the waterfront parcel, or $50 a front foot. Now, in some of those on the west side, again in your area, Larry, where you have a waterfront parcel and a road, and then you have an uplands parcel that is several feet above the road grade. On those, they're doing the waterfront parcel based on the front footage, and the uplands parcel, they're assessing at acreage value. And they meld those together to come up with what you see when you go online or you look at the tax roll. So the information to separate those is available in the assessor's office. And it affects some 60 or 70 parcels, as I recall. So, and that, is not part of our assignment, but Marianne, it requires another link in your formula to determine the assessment for flood control and water quality. So just one more step in the formula, which I think is going to answer the question of fair and equitable. Because the formula you showed us on your slide here last meeting or the meeting before, where 10% of the land area was on the waterfront and 90% was on the uplands portion, and the uplands portion had zero benefit, and so all rested on the waterfront portion. But by adding an additional step in your formula, I think it gives a lot fairer and more realistic assessment. Joe Hollenbach is appraisal supervisor, and Michelle Walker is the appraiser who's responsible for the Newman Lake area. So that information is available. Brad or Larry, either of you gotten out to do a detailed inspection of your section?
I did. I went back and looked at it.
I have not been back over, Gary.
Yeah, I haven't either. Weather permitting, I hope to get back and do a parcel by parcel analysis sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Of course, we got Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up, so.
I didn't do a parcel by parcel analysis. I was trying to get a feel for what the area that I was responsible for was like. and what the characteristics of the different, in my case, coves were. And so that when I look at the maps, I can translate that into what's on the ground, have an image of what's on the ground, so we can make judgments about where the lines ought to be and who gets what.
You may have enough information. I don't know. At this point, I don't. And, you know, maybe parcel by parcel was a bad statement, but I intend to spend a couple days at least and looking at possible additions or deletions area by area.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if there are a couple unique cases that you just can't figure out without going out there and having a map in your hand, you know, looking at the land. So I kind of expect to go back and go through that step.
Yeah, okay, good.
Gary, back to your split parcel conversation. Do we know, are improvements included in the assessments or not? There's been some discussion in some of the public comments that they are included or they aren't included. I just like to know if they are or aren't.
Is what included, Brian? I missed it.
Well, the improvements, like a house.
Yes, they are.
Is
Yeah.
that your understanding, Mary Ann? They are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And are the improvements included in the area in which they sit, or in a split parcel calculation, is it an average?
Currently in a split parcel calculation, it is an average. In other words, it's done by the total.
Okay, and so Gary, your analysis then of a up lake or a lakefront and upland area, that extra step in the formula would put the improvements in the correct location as well. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, do you have any comments on the written communications we got? Brian or Larry?
I don't have any comments.
I do. Trying quite a few actually, and I'm trying to consolidate them down into a few questions. And I'm trying to understand current use designations and the assessments for the flood control district. I understand current use is set up for ad valorem tax purposes in calculating property taxes, but are they set up to also value these special districts, like flood control districts? Does that extend to the districts or not? And I don't have an answer to that. In reading through, it was pretty clear in 8615, RCW 8615, that when it was originally set up, that current use, or that the flood control district assessments were an extension of the property tax assessments. But that's not clear in 8609. And I think we made a motion last meeting based on what we read in 8609, which to me, it's not clear as to whether or not these special current use taxes should apply to the district or not. And so I'd like to, get an opinion of whether or not those do. Some of the property owners believe they do, and some believe they don't. if it is an extension of the property tax situation, then we may need to reconsider our motion and look at current use values rather than market values. I don't know who can answer that for us.
So you're questioning whether it's right to use market value?
Correct.
And so if we used the current use number, that would reflect a lower value on those properties who have asked for tax abatement on their forest lands.
Well, multiple lands, forest, farm, ag, open space, all of those properties under current use.
Well, that's been one of the big points in the residents' comments about fair and equitable is, it's fine, you got a social purpose to reduce their ad valorem taxes, but they should contribute an equal amount as anyone else for flood control and for water quality, and that was our intent. I thought from our last meeting that we would recommend using market value because we're not attempting to arrive at any social benefit or social good. We're trying to come up with a fair and equitable manner of managing the lake.
And I agree with that, Gary, with the exception of unless the law says otherwise. If the law says it's an extension of property taxes, then we should consider that as well. And if property taxes mean we should use current use values, then that's the way it is. If it's not, then I agree with you that market value is appropriate. But again, in no way by using market value do we try to change the land use classification for ad valorem taxes by the assessor. That has no effect. It would still remain in that current use program, and there would be no effect to the person's property taxes, just like you said when we started out.
If you guys like, I think Casey could provide kind of his opinion on that in executive session at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
I think that's a question for Casey. I did not see anything on that subject in the RCWs, but I may have missed it. Not impossible.
Marianne, what parcels are exempt from district assessments now?
What parcels are what?
What types of parcels are exempt from district assessments now?
I don't think there are, other than the district owned parcels. I think everybody, even the state owned, the boat launch pays a fee.
Do they? Okay.
State owned property.
It seems like there were some comments that there are some designated forest lands in the upper watershed that are exempt. And if they are, I just wondered why. They may not have a current benefit ratio.
I suspect that that's what they meant, but
They have a zero benefit ratio.
Is that what's meant by that? Okay.
I don't know.
But there are no parcels that you know of that are specifically exempt from assessments.
Correct. They may pay on a lower valuation. But if they're in a benefit area, they pay something.
Okay.
Who, Marianne, who drew the boundaries of this flood control district? And what was their rationale?
Well, it was drawn at the time of the initial formation of the district. And my understanding is that, just generally followed the watershed boundaries. Beyond that, I would just be speculating because we don't have a lot of documentation from that point.
Okay, so there is some precedent for water quality that everyone in the district should pay something. If this all this area within the boundaries drains into Newman Lake, that everybody should pay something.
I don't know that I can answer that. If you're asking me a question, I don't know if I can answer that, but I can say that how it is now is that it's only in the areas that had defined benefit. It was set up under the previous maps.
So that is something we could consider when it comes to water quality.
If you determine that more parcels benefit than are currently determined, that's my understanding of what your job is. So
Everything in this flood control district drains into Newman Lake, then everybody should pay something, some more than others, depending on the situation and the proximity.
well,
Anyway,
Well,
just a comment.
I had kind of different reactions to it when I was out driving. I mean, it was real obvious to me that all the waterfront properties had a flood control benefit. And all the waterfront properties also had a water quality benefit. But I was kind of scratching my head and going, how does a property that's 150 feet above the lake that doesn't have lake access have either one benefit from either of those things?
Well, the
And
water
I think
drains
part
from
of it
the,
is that this whole thing is set up on benefit. It's not set up on who's causing the problem. And so if we're just looking at it from benefit, I was scratching my head about how the off-water properties have, some of them have a 60% benefit. Well, if they're not on the water, how do you get 60%?
well, I looked at it from the standpoint of their contribution to the pollution of the lake, such as one being, across the road from the lake has got a septic system, and that septic system doesn't drain upward, it drains downward and contributes negatively to the quality of water.
But that's not a benefit.
If you add to that though, Gary, if things are making their way into the lake and then the flood control district mitigates those things either through managing the flood levels or improving water quality, those are benefits. So they are benefits that accrue to the properties for certain things. I would throw this out there is if you have a lot that's up on the hill and has a very nice view of the lake, is it a benefit to have a view of a clean lake versus a lake filled with algae? Or even the smells of, you know, algae and in the area, if there was no water quality, I think there wouldn't be a benefit there. I think the water quality is bringing a benefit of view, perhaps smell. A general benefit to the area is if, you know, you have a clean lake with recreation, it's helping maintain property values. Whereas if you didn't have that, there would be no benefit there. So I think there's some benefits that we need to think about, and, you know, perhaps again, I think I asked last time to get some input from the public to see what are the benefits that are, you know, that are tangible and intangible, the ones that we don't think about, and see if those apply to other properties that weren't considered before.
Those are good points.
Yeah, good point, Brian. Have any other member comments?
I'm gonna go through my list here.
When I look at the lake, to me, it doesn't look clean. It doesn't look like the efforts that are underway fix the problems. They may mitigate them, but they don't fix the problems. And fixing them would require probably a septic system. And it would require some biofiltration on the water coming into the lake if there are upstream causes.
Well, one of the comments on our tour was that the system is outdated. It does need to be updated, and consequently, it's not doing the job that it was designed to do anymore. But it all takes money.
When I was a kid, my folks had a place on a lake in Iowa, and it suffered from many of the same problems. The causes in that case were different. There were septic systems around the lake, but the lake was much less densely developed than this lake. But there were huge cattle operations around the lake. And a lot of that algae was there because of the cattle operations. In this case, that doesn't seem to be an issue. Well, I didn't see any cattle up lake, you know. And Mary Ann has talked about the fact that the lake is actually a peat bog that someone's made deeper, and that the peat underneath is decaying, and that creates a lot of the food for the algae, the phosphorus, probably some nitrogen. But again, those don't seem to be benefit issues. Those seem to be causal. And maybe that's not important, but that's a distinction that bothers me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I think the causal situation is part of our assignment. Why does the county have to spend X number of dollars to clean up the lake because somebody's, they're not let's say running a cattle operation half a mile from the lake, and all the stuff from that feedlot feeds down into the lake. And so I think the causal thing is a valid concern.
Okay.
I have two other thoughts. If you look at the mission statement at the Newman Lake Flood Control District, it talks about some of the efforts that they're trying to do in the area, and it speaks to benefits in my opinion. Manage lake level, improve water quality, and I think I'm not finding it now, but it talks about stormwater management, watershed management, leadership. And so there's quite a few other things that they're doing that directly affect more properties in the watershed than just the ones that we see now. So if they're spending time and effort and money on watershed issues, I think that, in my opinion, should be recognized as one of the roles that the flood control district is performing. So you may want to look at their mission statement there and form your own opinion, but that's kind of the way I see it.
I totally agree with you, Brian.
The other question I had is, in the packet you originally gave us, Marianne, it had the RCW 8615, the original one where the district was created, and then the 8609, which is what's in effect now. And then right after that in the book, I noticed today there's another 8615. What is that RCW 8615 for? And is that something we should consider, or was it? I'm not sure why it was in there if it doesn't apply to us.
I'd have to go back and check, Brian, see what we actually sent you.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments from the board?
None from me.
Okay, do we have any members of the public that want to address us?
Say that again.
I just wondered if we have any members of the public that want to speak to us.
Oh.
Marianne, who's in charge of that? Ron?
I think so.
Yeah, do you want to go to public testimony now?
Please.
Okay. So if you're on Zoom in the audience, just raise your hand, push the raise hand button, or *9 if you're on the phone.
Chantel, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just have one quick comment for Mr. Vincent regarding the RCWs. If you could maybe speak with Casey, I guess, on this issue. There are some special benefit assessment RCWs that are specific to farm, agriculture, and timberland for special benefit assessments. And that is 84.34.300 and 84.34.310, specific to flood control district.
Could you repeat those, Chantel?
It was 84.34.300 and 84.34.310. I'm sure he has them, but I thought that those applied specific to the special benefit assessments for ag and timber. designations on the valuations.
Thank you, Chantel, for that. I was actually looking at 8434 this morning, trying to see where it applied on current use properties, and I'll read these and see how it applies or interpret it, and perhaps Casey as well. Thank
And
you for that.
the only other, I have one other small comment is on the benefits. I know that on our farmlands, for example, we no longer graze cattle because they had, and I don't know if you know this history, but we used to, but we don't due to the water quality. So we stopped grazing cattle, and then we no longer fertilize our hay fields. So our production has, decreased significantly. I don't have those numbers in front of me. But we have made contributions to the benefits or the lake quality on our own by just taking reductions. And we are in ag land. So we've, we don't have an income from that, or we don't, but we do pay a tax on that. And that's why I do think our valuation should be based on assessed values and not market values. Thank you.
Can you explain a little bit on the benefits that you were talking about? You said you no longer graze cattle and you don't fertilize, but
right. I mean, like right now we're assessed on the benefit, for flood. I believe it's flood or water quality.
okay.
And what I'm saying is, we're already receiving a loss on our lands by not being able to raise cattle there, not fertilizing, in order to help the community or the issue of the water quality. We're already taking that hit.
Okay.
Oh, hold
So
on.
the
I think
reason that
my
you're not
brothers,
raising cattle anymore is for the benefit of the community?
right. And you know what? I'm going to pause because my brother's, he's going to raise his hand and chat on this. He's better at this comment.
Cool.
He's texting me now, so he's raising his hand. So I'll exit the floor and let him have that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Al?
Okay, so am I on?
Yes, you're
Just
on.
unmuted.
You were on, you're off now.
Let's see.
Go ahead, Al.
How about now?
There you go. You're on.
Okay. So as far as like the ag land, we used to graze cattle down on the lower fields. So between the county road and the lake. And we so the first step that we did was we fenced off there's a not a part-time, I guess, running creek that goes from our spring down to the lake. We fenced that off. We fenced off the water. Then the next step was that we got rid of the cattle. And then we, after that, we started, we quit fertilizing all the hay fields. And I guess we had multiple issues doing that. We've got added weed control because the grasses aren't growing as well. And so the weeds come in. And so we've had an extra cost of weed control. And then our hay production went down by about 60%. So we used to get about 12,000 bales annually, and now we're down to about 4,000. So as far as like the ag land, that's what we've done to mitigate nutrients going into the lake. And then with the forest land, I guess ecology and forest departments. You have to go through a process of like flagging off any place that like water runs. So if there's like any exposed like gravel that shows that there's running water there, you can't harvest in that area, or it's greatly reduced. And so you have like a riparian zone around streams where you don't go in and log, and that helps keep nutrients finding their way into the lake, further downstream in the watershed. So there's, like those in those areas, those are typically high revenue areas because that's where the cedar are. So, you take a hit trying to, keep erosion and nutrients leaving the soil up in the forest area. So, I mean, the state is doing quite a bit in that area for the forest land. That's about all I have to contribute on that.
I really understand and see what you're talking about. So I wanted to provide that feedback. I also have a question, which is, I don't know where your land is.
North end of Newman Lake.
Okay, and are those is your house? And I think that was a barn I saw relatively close to the lake there by where the creek goes into the lake.
So I don't have a house there, but my parents' house is, all the houses are on the, I guess, north or east side of Muzzy Road. So they're,
Yes, okay.
yeah, so there's no structures that are on the lake side of Muzzy Road.
And
So
those are up in the woods?
The first one that you come to that's on the road is my parents' house. And then the next one is a trailer house, which is my niece's, and she's up at the end of a small field. And then my next sister is up on the hill. And then the next one is is a white house up at the end of the field.
And do you know, are you in a zero contribution zone?
I don't know what I pay. I have some secondary lots that are part of my forest land that I pay some on, and I don't think I pay anything on the forest on the big parcel that's 80 acres. But I think there's some secondary lots that East Newman Lake Drive split, and I pay something on those, I'm pretty sure, but it's not, I mean, it's the value, since they're in the forest land, the assessed amount isn't very much. And I'd have to look at the tax deal to see what I pay. But I think,
And
I
you
think
know,
I
we're not
paid
talking
a-
about taxes. We're talking about how
flood
much-
control assessment, yes. Yeah, so I think I have some flood control assessment on the secondary lots, but none on the bigger 80 acre parcel.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm reading this map right, but it looks to me like you might be in a 10% zone.
Yeah.
There's
I'd
no
have to
parcel
look.
lines on the map, so
I'd have to look to see what I've got. It's not, I mean, it's not like hundreds of dollars. I know that
Mhm.
I mean, the total tax on those parcels are probably on the order of $30. They're just a small lot in forest land. So it's not significant.
So whose area is that in? Is that in Brian's area or
That'd be in my area.
that's in your area?
Yeah. It's on the east side of Thompson Creek. Elb, is that correct?
It's on the, so it is close to East Newman, like the intersection of East Newman Lake Drive and Muzzy.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's my area. Okay, thank you, Ellen. Do we have anyone else on board? Dennis, go right ahead.
Good morning. Just a couple comments on the discussion I've heard this morning. Gary, you asked the question how the district boundary was originally made. And the answer we heard was that we used the watershed to define our benefit area for flooding. Is there something perhaps that we missed here? Seemingly we should actually use the flooding area as being a primary versus in addition to perhaps the watershed. So that's one comment. Part of what I think we have here is if I can throw trash on my neighbor's lot and he pays to pick it up, why would I not just keep throwing trash on my neighbor's lot? And why wouldn't I fight it when he tried to make me pick up my own trash or pay for it? Now, your challenge here is to figure out how that fits the word benefit. You have the whole watershed draining to this lake, paying nothing. You have 16,000 acres upstream from the lake, paying nothing. You have all the watershed to the canal and the sump to consider. Some of that pays, some of that doesn't. So that's the second point. And third is, I think this was yours, Brian. If I have an algae-filled lake that is often not safe for human or pets to get in, why would I even want to live on the waterfront? Why would I want to live in a secondary lot? Why would I want to live in this area at all? The health of the lake benefits the community and the cost of real estate, the stability of real estate. The challenge again is how you interpret that to the word of benefit, because remember, one of our biggest problems is you're taking water quality and trying to make it fit to a procedure that's made for flood control, and it doesn't fit. You have no guidelines for water quality. It's the wrong way to go. So that's my third comment, and I think that's all I have from this morning. I really appreciate you guys' time.
What's your solution?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you my solution, and I'll be very candid about it. The district boundary has to be reconstructed. It's all wrong. It's wrong for flooding, and it's wrong for water quality. The answer should be you should dissolve the existing district, create a new one for flood control, because that can be bounded in its area for benefit. And on water quality in a public lake that has thousands of visitors during the summer that have no residents on or near the lake, that should not be paid for by the owners next to the lake. That should be paid for, as it is in other counties in Washington, by the county, and should be a county function of management and control. I know that doesn't fit in your scope, guys, but we're looking for you guys to give us some help.
Okay, thanks,
So you also made a comment about the lake not being safe to be for you or your pets. Are you claiming that that's the case, or was that just an example?
No, you can look back. I think, Mary Ann, did we have 2 warning periods this year where we were told to stay out of the lake this fall?
Yeah, kind of one extended period this fall.
So,
yeah.
As one of you mentioned earlier, Larry, I think it was you, the lake doesn't look clean, and it's not. The time of year that you look at it and the weather we have and the temperature we have, the runoff we get, boy, this was a great spring for us. It didn't rain. We had no runoff. Nutrients were down, and we had a clear lake for what, June, July? Boy, it was great. I think even into August.
Oh, that's interesting.
The algae caught up with us in the fall. Usually it catches up with us a little early, but no, typically our months of August, September are algae filled, and we may or may not get to the point of having Marianne's people declare a warning and tell us to stay out of the lake for health reasons. So no, it's a reality. It's not an example, Larry. Thank you.
Does the lake smell in the summer?
It depends exactly where you live. I can live at my house, which the wind blows across my lot in the prevailing wind. So I don't have too much of an odor. If you go to the end of the bay where it blows the algae and it accumulates, it smells terrible.
Okay, any other questions for Dennis? Okay, thanks, Dennis. Appreciate the
Sure.
input.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Any other public testimony? Matthew, you're on board. Can you hear me, Matthew?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're on.
Oh, I hit the wrong button on my, sorry about that. Couple things. So I think I understand where things have been, where things are trying to go, and it seems like you might be limited in your options, and I don't know how much sway your recommendations have with the county, but I would echo, it seems to me that the current assignment of costs is a little too limited, and that ideally, if the lake potentially can flood all the way down to Trent, then potentially a house that lives on near Trent, near that flood area, should have some sort of cost involved for this. But the way the district's mapped now, it doesn't. Even if you expand it to the 1,700 houses instead of 700, that still doesn't do that mile or so north of Trent. So I don't know that you can do anything besides a recommendation to the county, but it does seem like the borders of who is truly benefiting from flood control might need to be redesigned, remapped. And it does seem like, to what the other gentleman said, that there are some things, because Newman Lake is unique, things have turned out that residents of the lake are paying things that the county normally covers with other lakes. So that seems like a secondary issue, but it's still one that I would certainly be interested in trying to rectify. But I do understand the need for probably the flood control portion still being the responsibility of the residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Rick, go ahead.
Yes, I want to make a comment to Larry's point and then ask Brian a question about current use. And so, Larry, the quality of the lake in August was terrible with the toxic algae bloom. That's the first I recall of having that serious of a toxic algae problem. The lake has an aeration system that you know about, I'm sure, and the pump there in Sutton Bay has the capability of producing twice as much aeration effect, but the line in the lake will not accommodate that much aeration output. So if the county changed that that line in the lake to accommodate twice the aeration outflow, it would be great to know if that would resolve the algae problem or a certain percentage of the algae problem. The other thing is that 42% of the phosphorus is coming through the Thompson Creek part of the lake. And Gonzaga is working on some false dams to help slow down the flow through Thompson Creek to that Professor Gonzaga couldn't answer what effect that will have on reducing the phosphorus into the lake from 42% down to 32 or 22 or 12 or some other number. So I think there are some things that can be done regarding water quality with the aeration system that we have in place now. And Brian, to your point about current use, I heard Chantel and her brother talk about how they've moderated their land use already with a lack of cattle and a lack of fertilizer, reducing fertilizer and cattle. And so under current use, they would benefit, wouldn't they, from a current use assessment or formula that says, look what they're doing to improve water quality, because they don't have cows on there, they've reduced their fertilizer. Is that what's meant by current use in your mind?
Current use in my mind is as it's defined by the state. So however they apply for a current use status, whether it's farm and ag or timber or whatever, by limiting their use of the property and to the benefit of the public for the scenic beauty and enjoyment of the area, that's a benefit to everyone in the area. That's a different benefit from the benefits of the operations of the flood control district. So I think our job is to measure by having a dam and flood control gates and the water quality improvement structures you referred to done by the county. Those are the benefits that we're measuring. So I'm not sure how that applies to current use or your question. Maybe you could ask it in a different way.
Well, I was asking for some clarity about how current use would be applied. And I think you said that the WAC has a definition and it doesn't necessarily relate to the example that I provided.
So let me comment. And my view of this may not be right, but it is what I think is right. And that is that those current use categories are the result of a political effort many years ago to preserve agricultural use and to recognize that by keeping it in agricultural use instead of residential use, that they are sacrificing profit, and that the state as a whole benefits from having agricultural land, and therefore the owners of the agricultural land and the forest lands deserve a tax break. And as a result, they came up with this concept of use value instead of market value, and they give those lands a tax break for the reasons I just mentioned. And that's sort of my layman's view of it, and it may not be very precise, but I think that's the general concept. And if that is the general concept, I'm wondering, why would that affect? I mean, just because the state decides that for state taxation purposes that they should get a tax break, doesn't mean that they should pay less for the flood control or the water quality. Maybe the community as a whole would decide that they should get a tax break for that, but it seems very different to me. And I'm a very long ways from having made up my mind on anything as relates to what we're doing here. But that's my understanding. That's my frame of reference.
Thank you, Larry. That helps me with my understanding as well. I think that's probably correct. Yeah,
Rick, let me add to what I said earlier too. This is Brian. So on the Balcom property, they have moderated their land use, and they've not been able to operate their land as they once did in the past. And so in the last flood assessment, they were assigned a benefit ratio for their properties. And now, at least I will look at it this way, is if they can no longer use their land in a way that they did, then perhaps the benefit to their property from the flood control and water quality issues has changed. Maybe it's gone down. And that's something we're going to need to look at as we go through this process. So hopefully that helps a little bit in our, explaining our thought process.
I know you're going to go into executive session to discuss more about current use. So thank you for your comments.
Sure.
Many times in executive session, what's going on is we're being advised on what's legal. And someone expressed a concept the other day or inferred it that we are somehow going into executive session and reaching conclusions in executive session. And that's not what's going on. An executive session is so that we can be briefed by the county lawyer as to what's appropriate and inappropriate and whether we're following the laws or not.
Right.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Appreciate your comments. Do we have anyone else that wants to speak to us? Oh, Rosalie, go ahead.
Good morning. I am just sitting here reading the whole history of the Newman Lake flood control zone. And I don't think much has changed in all the years that it's been there. It was formed at the request of Newman Lake property owners to get assistance in managing the lake level and flooding problems around Newman Lake. So as you're assessing benefit, I think those original owners back in 1968 requested it. A man-made outlet and channel was put in to help them, but they still to this day are the primary people who benefit from the lake. I just wanted to make one comment on water quality of the lake as well, because I see that further down in the history. And the water quality at the lake, as more and more homes have been built on that lake and more sewage is near the lake or into the lake, I don't know that you're ever going to actually improve the total quality of the lake until that lake is sewered. But that would be up to the property owners on that lake.
That seems sort of an obvious thing to me, although I don't know if it's technically correct or not.
Okay, thank you, Rosalie. Do we have anyone else wishes to speak? Matthew, back on the board.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I forgot my other thing earlier. This is, again, I know it's, I'll just, okay, so I'll say it. So the mention of septic and impact to the lake and distance to the lake, I don't know if that's something that can be considered or should be considered. But if we look at what are setback requirements, if look at EPA website. If a septic's 5 feet from the lake, then that's not meeting guidelines. Some houses don't even have septic. They have, what's it called? It's just like a big, huge, there are some houses on the lake that have cesspools. They don't even have a septic. And then when we think about the actual septic, if septic is somehow factored into this overall cost, I would suggest that maybe also, does that septic meet guidelines? So for example, is a septic 10 feet or is it 300 feet away? And usually if you look at guidelines, septic needs to be between 50 and 100 feet from water or from a water source. So maybe a septic that's 500 feet away has no impact or less impact than a septic that is 50 feet away. But then of course we get back into all this convoluted math. So I guess my concern is just that some houses, if septic is suddenly added to the equation, that some houses costs would go up even more because they're on the lake and they have a septic or a cesspool right next to the lake. So if the scope of the cost isn't expanded to more houses, we could end up actually increasing the cost for people who are actually on the lake. That's my comment again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment, Matt.
Does
Anyone else?
anyone have any comment on the advisability of charging people to put their boats in the lake?
Charging people for what?
Charging to put your boat in the lake.
I think that's a state function on their site there. No, good question. I don't know.
And by that, I mean the general public using the boat launch.
I don't know.
So the reason I bring it up is that there have been several people that have commented about expanding the area to include more houses. And there have been other people that have talked about the fact that most of the use on the lake is not by residents, but by people from the county in general coming in and putting their boat in the lake and using it on a day basis.
Mhm.
And that maybe part of the answer is charging to put your boat in the lake.
Yeah. I think that's probably a question we want to ask Casey about. But my gut reaction is that if the state doesn't charge, then the county can't really override the state, but maybe they can. I don't know. But I think that's a question for Casey.
Okay.
Any other comments? Dennis, go ahead.
Just to respond to that question, and Mary Ann, you're going to have to keep me on it. As the community has looked at that, the people launching boats from our public facility have to have a Discover Pass on their truck. So the state sees it that they are already charging for that as minor. And again, now that money doesn't come back to the lake. That money goes to the state. We had some community members do a survey, I think on a couple weekends, maybe a couple summers ago, and interview people that came to the lake. And one of the questions they asked them was, would you object to paying a launch fee to use our lake if the monies went towards keeping the water clean and that sort of thing? And as I recall, the response was, no, we pay it at a lot of places to access the lake. The only thing they were concerned with is, can you guarantee me that if I pay you a launch fee, that it really goes to keeping the lake clean? So I think that I agree with you, and that's a Casey question to see what the state implies as a law. But I believe, like the homeowners, we don't object to paying something for flood. I don't think the boat users object to paying something for access. The question is how you do it. And then obviously, if you try to invoke it, the major problem is the logistics of how you do that. So thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
then you've got to hire somebody out there to monitor the
don't check that.
launch pad, and you got another salary or two involved. Okay, any more comments?
I'd like to just chime in on that a little bit. I think that falls under, other funding sources. And it seems like there's a theme here that, perhaps there's a way for the county outside of this flood control district process and our limited scope, they could go after other funds through grants and launch fees and other things to help offset some of the costs. But I don't know that that's part of what we're doing now. I do feel like, and you may have mentioned this earlier, Mary Ann, on the boat launch property that's owned by the state. I haven't looked at the map recently, but I'm assuming that they would fall in a 100% benefit ratio area. Are they being assessed for their parcel for the flood control district now? They are?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it does pay an assessment.
And
It's not huge. I don't remember exactly what it is, but a few $100s, I think, something on that order.
so typically, the assessor does not assess state-owned land. They come up, they either say it's tax exempt, therefore we don't track the value. And perhaps somebody needs to value that parcel for what it's being used for. And if the value as a boat launch is more than they're currently assessed for, maybe some of the money can be recaptured by assessing it correctly. I don't know what the assessment is on that parcel, but it seems to me the value of a boat launch parcel is more than a typical neighboring waterfront home site. So that may be able to be looked into as well.
Okay, any other input from the public? Okay, anything, Brian or Larry, you want to bring up?
Nope.
I don't think so, Gary.
Pardon me?
No, I don't think I have anything else.
Okay. Mary Ann, anything you got lined up for the next meeting?
No, that's
I can't think of anything.
Okay. We want to set up a time for a December meeting?
Sure.
Didn't we say something about the 3rd?
About what?
About December the 3rd?
Friday, December 30?
No, December 3rd.
Our next meeting scheduled for December 1st,
December
Wednesday.
1st.
Yeah, I think we scheduled it last time, Gary. We scheduled 2.
We scheduled for what?
We scheduled 2 meetings, today's meeting and December 1st meeting
First, okay.
Yeah. already.
Okay. I think that concludes our meeting, except for the executive session. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're going, is Casey available?
Thank you, everybody.
So do we check out at this point? Is that what
Yeah,
happens?
does everyone have their executive session link?
Oh,
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we'll adjourn this meeting and log into the next one.
Thank you.